but what would they be on the record?
Well, the mitigating factors mean what factors could we submit to either a jury or a judge that would somehow be utilized by them in determining or deciding that a lesser punishment should be imposed. And the most important thing I would want to utilize is whether or not this kid had some prior psychiatric disorder, or he had some disorder that had never been treated before, right? Did he have behavioral problems? Did he have abuse problems in the home? And what about the guns? I mean, is there just a bunch of guns lying around this kid's house? You know, and what about the parents? Don't they bear some responsibility? I mean, if you have guns and there's
that's
kids
a very
around,
good point.
Right. I mean, why is the kid being forced to bear the complete responsibility when the parents allowed a loaded gun to just be accessible by an 11-year-old? So these are some of the factors that I would bring to the attention of the court in an attempt to reduce the penalty involved here for him. Because, you know, those are very formative years between the ages of 11 and 19. You can never get those years back. And to be just locked away, that's a terrible fate for anyone, especially an 11-year-old.
Yeah, no question about it. But we do have to send a message to anybody that's watching or listening that even if you're 11, or I guess take a 12-year-old or that's watching what happens to an 11-year-old that does this, at least a lesson can be learned if we can take something out of this, that this kid will be held basically you will be held responsible even if you are 11. So maybe there is a young kid watching the show and saying to him or herself, maybe I shouldn't do this. Look what just happened with the situation here. So do you think that would help?
I think that any lessons that will be learned will not be learned by, random 11-years. They don't even watch the news. They're too busy playing, trying games and, maybe playing sports or riding bikes or something. I don't know how many are watching, stories on crime and stuff like that. But I think the big lesson will go to the parents. Parents watch the show. And they will begin to learn that, hey, listen, your kid messes up, he's going to be held accountable. So what it would effectively do is force the parents to keep a closer eye on their kid and to go and get treatment if they need treatment, have them see a doctor if they need a doctor, medication, and basically warn parents, you better exercise better judgment. Don't have guns lying around because we're going to go after you and we're going to go after your children, and everything's going to be destroyed if you don't do what you are expected to do as a parent. So I think a lesson can be learned, but the receiver of those lessons are likely to be the adults of the kids.
Absolutely. Okay, this clip is a couple of weeks old, but it gets to the story that I want to talk about, even though the judge had ruled prior to this clip. But for the audience's sake, I do want to play this clip of Bill Cosby and then get your take on the other side.
I'm Michael Smerconish. We start with breaking news, my exclusive story about comedian Bill Cosby and evidence that I believe jeopardizes the criminal case against him. You'll recall that just a few weeks ago, the famous comedian was finally hauled into court in suburban Philadelphia to face charges for sexually assaulting Temple University employee Andrea Constand. This after at least 50 different women, you see many of their faces here, all had come forward to say Bill Cosby had molested them. I have learned that this case, the only criminal charge that Cosby has ever faced, might soon fall apart. I have obtained a document that no other journalist has that could blow the case up. I talked about it a bit last night on AC 360, but now, new information. So let me back up and tell you the story. Back in 2005, the then District Attorney of Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, Bruce Castor, was investigating Andrea Constand's case. Castor has said he wanted to prosecute Bill Cosby, but believed he did not have enough evidence to sustain criminal charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Still, he thought that Constad might get justice in a civil suit, and he claims he made an unusual deal to create an atmosphere where she could get that justice. The DA told the comedian's attorney, essentially, I won't prosecute your client if you promise that he'll testify fully in a civil case. Cosby's attorney allegedly agreed. It was a deal. In the deposition, Cosby admits he had sexual relationships with at least 5 women outside his marriage, gave prescription sedatives to women he wanted to have sex with, and tried to hide affairs from his wife. Cosby says he gave Constad 1.5 tablets of Benadryl, an over-the-counter antihistamine that can cause drowsiness, to relieve stress. He said that the sex and drug taking were always consensual. Why would Cosby testify so openly? Because, allegedly, he believed it would never be used against him in a criminal court. The civil case against Cosby was settled, and the deposition remained sealed for many years, but then, last year, a judge decided to release a transcript of it. And the explosive charges Cosby faces now are largely based on that transcript, which we now know could very well be thrown out of court when the case has a hearing on February 2nd. In the last few days, I obtained an email, this email that I confirmed was written by ex-DA Bruce Castor to his successor last year, 3 months before the charge against Cosby. Only those involved in the case have seen this email until now. It's the only clear record of the deal that was made promising not to prosecute Bill Cosby. And here's an excerpt. Castor wrote, I can see no possibility that Cosby's deposition could be used in a state criminal case because I would have to testify as to what happened, and the deposition would be subject to suppression. I cannot believe any state court judge would allow that deposition into evidence. Knowing this, unless you can make out a case without that deposition, and without anything the deposition led you to, I think Cosby would have an action against the county and maybe even against you personally. Bruce Castor has been subpoenaed to appear at the hearing on February 2nd, at which time I believe the case could fall apart.
Okay, Alex Sanchez, what do you make of this case? Let me switch phones here.
Well, as you know, when I've appeared on your show previously to discuss Bill Cosby, I have been horrified at the allegations that he committed all these offenses against these women. Right. And the allegations sound credible to me because, you know, yeah, you can get a random woman here and a random woman there, and just like the woman who tried to bring phony charges against the Duggar kid, you know, bring some phony charges up. But to get 50, I mean, you know, that gets a little bit ridiculous because then you'd have to be getting 50 separate women that are orchestrating this massive conspiracy against him. And I don't buy it. I think that I've listened to those women. I've listened to the stories. I'm troubled by the fact that some of these women would go and take drugs that were offered them. That sounds pretty crazy. But some of them sound credible to me. Some of them sound like he attempted to force themselves on him. And, you know, on top of that, he did give that statement in which he essentially admitted that he used drugs to give women so he can have sex with them. I don't know why you would need to give drugs to someone if they are going to have sex with you. What's the point? I mean, just go and have sex with them. What do you need the drugs for? You're going to give drugs. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You're going to give drugs if you think that it
you give drugs to yourself, maybe.
Resistance. To break down all resistance, you're going to sneak them some drugs or give them some drugs, you know, which is outrageous. And that's known as a rape. When you do not obtain consent, when a person is incapable of consent because they're under the influence of drugs, that's rape. And I think he did engage in that type of behavior. But let me tell you something. As much as I think Bill Cosby should be prosecuted, I believe in playing the game by the rules. And Bill Cosby was told by the former prosecutor, as he so admitted, because there was a hearing that was held. A hearing was held before a judge to determine whether or not a deal was made. And the judge listening to the hearing said, no, I don't think there was any hearing that was made. Those statements can be used against him. right?
Right.
That's outrageous. A former prosecutor testified, no, we made an agreement. You know, a prosecutor, the district attorney at that time, Castor, was an elected official. He's speaking on behalf of the people whom he represents. He's speaking on behalf of the government. He made a deal. He made a deal that those statements made by Cosby would not be used against him, period. And now the district attorney's office is trying to back out of that deal. And the grounds and the reason why the judge said, oh, I don't believe there was a deal because it wasn't in writing. It's irrelevant whether or not it was in writing. Was there a deal or was there not a deal? Yes, it should have been in writing. But the fact that it was not in writing doesn't mean there wasn't a deal. Because otherwise, it would have made no sense for Cosby to have testified, right, in the absence of a deal. And on top of that, if there was no deal, once Cosby testified, then Castor could have gone ahead and used those statements against him, which he did not do. And then Castor has subsequently admitted there was a deal. So why is this statement, or why are these statements being used against Cosby? And I hate Bill Cosby, and I think he committed those offenses. But hey, you got to play by the rules. You better play. You got to play by the rules. The fight has to be fair. A deal was made. Those statements which said could not be used against him. And let me tell you, if Cosby gets convicted, that case is guaranteed to be reversed. Guaranteed.
Yeah, you know, Alex, I was reading Forbes, and he's still one of the top 5 richest men in the world, or in the United States, I should say, along with Oprah Winfrey, Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, I was very surprised that he has so much money. I wonder if that money's going to be there, what I read at least, when this case concludes, if he is acquitted even, on all the lawyers that have been speaking upon him. You know, they're not cheap, as you know. Somebody like Monique Presley, who is very good with words and a very talented attorney. All the attorneys that he has a whole team there. And the other thing is, this is also a death penalty case, in essence. Bill Cosby is 80 years old. If he gets a 10-year deal, and even if he just does 5 of that, that's basically a death penalty, because he doesn't look so good right now. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, he's only facing right now that one criminal charge. And number one, even if he's convicted of that criminal charge, there's going to be all kinds of appeals. I mean, he may end up dropping dead before he ever steps foot into a prison, because there's going to be some very legitimate appeals. And the appeal is going to be based largely on the fact that admission should not have been used against him, and the prior DA agreed with that. So I don't see how it's going to be upheld on appeal. But you say he's one of the richest guys. I read that he was worth $400 million. And I don't know if he's worth more than that, but let's say for argument's sake he's worth $400 million. If he decided to end all these civil cases against these 50 women, say, you know what, you know, I'm old and I don't want to fight these cases anymore. I'll tell you what, you know, I'll give you $5 million each. Let's everybody go home and be happy. 5 million times 50 is $250 million. So he loses $250 million. And he's worth $400 million, so he walks away with $150 million. I know he'll be poor, but I think he can deal with that. So
he'll have his life
he may
back.
Want to end it just by paying everybody off. You know?
He'll never have his career back, but he'll have his life back, the way you put it. And of course, if he's found not guilty, if it doesn't go through, you know. And there's one last thing on this, Cosby. There are a lot of people that think this is a conspiracy to get the black man. And I'm not being racist. Many of my good friends are black. A lot of people that you hear as guests on this show are black. So I'm just saying, though, it does seem to come that a lot of black people feel that this is like a Rodney King almost, they compared it to, I was reading, and I just don't want to, you know, just look at the facts. I mean, in the evidence, he said I used quite, he admitted